All right. Good morning, KW Prosperity. It is Matt and Mary Beth here with you for part two of shift tactic number 9, which is all about fire urgency.
Good
One thing
morning.
good morning. Uh, Mary Beth, before we dive into the material, one thing I did want to just quick highlight is for those of you watching along on Facebook or who just hopped onto the live, um, if you haven't shared the GoFundMe link that we have set up for St. Joe's Hospital, where we're trying to provide basically meals for an
We're
entire
not
shift.
trying. We're not trying. We are providing.
We're providing an entire shift's worth of food. So we're providing 225 meals for an entire shift at St. Joe's Hospital. So if you haven't
You
seen
like how you did that? Shift to the shift.
yeah. In my head, I was like, oh, we're shifting for the shift.
You're so cool.
So if you see the GoFundMe account or page, we posted it on our public Facebook page. But those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, if you could just, obviously anything is good. So any amount of money, we'd be very grateful so we can provide an entire shift's worth of food for the St. Joe's Hospital in Wayne.
Hey, just $10. Just $10 actually provides a full individually packaged meal. So just $10.
Yep, and we're working with our local eateries. I know Bill was working with Anthony Franco's in Wayne and different places. So
yep.
I just wanted to highlight that because if nothing else, it's also a good opportunity to share something with your database. We've talked a lot about reaching out to your sphere, organizing your database. This would be something that you'd be able to put out to them since we're helping serve the community. Okay, so with that, I wanted to dive back into shift tactic number 9, which was about buyer urgency. One thing that we left off on yesterday that you had started to go into was tapping into their why, and that's really pages 184, 185, and 186. I think you did an extremely amazing job of hitting all the key components, and we've gone into, in other chapters, tapping into a seller's why and motivations in that. The one thing I just wanted to highlight on page 185, one thing that Gary mentioned that he used to always do, and I really liked this, is he said he would take out a blank sheet of paper and he would put a line down the middle of the paper, and on the left-hand side, he would write the word wants, and on the other side, he would write needs. And then he would ask the buyers, okay, what do you want and what do you need? So we'd walk through that list. Then when they'd go through houses, when they got to one that Gary, would pull out the sheet and say, okay, we're looking at this right now. This home is everything you want and everything you need, right? So if you leave here without buying this home, it will be gone. The very next buyer who walks in will buy this house and it'll be gone forever. Can you live with that? So that was great to me because we're talking about buyer urgency and buyers who are reluctant to submit offers. I really like the example that he gave of going through the wants and the needs to be able to kind of push them to say, okay, well, this house meets all your wants and your needs, and we talked about yesterday how you're not going to know when that line's going to bottom out. So, if things are going down, if you're a buyer, submit the offer.
Right. And we used to use a script that while you sleep on it, while you sleep on it, you may never be able to sleep in it. Yep. Because others will be making the decision to put that offer out. And for a buyer, if you've done the consultation properly, and I think that that's what you have to go back to, if you cannot motivate your buyer to make a better offer or to, even write an offer because they're not sure, maybe often the challenge is the buyer will say, there's going to be another better house. What's going to come on next week? We're going to wait to see what other homes come on. And there will always be a better house, something that fits the needs more, or your needs will change. And so with Gary's must-haves, that is something that is imperative on a buyer consultation. And if you just narrow it down to the 5 must-haves, it's a lot easier for you to walk into a home, have a buyer experience a tour, and then say, well, that's not for me, or I'm not sure if this is the one. And then for you to go really just straight to the point. Well, does it offer 4 bedrooms? Check. Does it offer a large backyard? Check. Does it offer a Open kitchen, check. Does it offer the backyard pool? Check. And it offers a 2-car garage, check. What on this list we have to take off and add a different important? What is it missing? What is the house missing? Now, if you look at it and it clearly only has 2 out of 5, well, that's where we're emotionally liking it just to kind of settle for it. And now you can understand why your buyer does not. It's a mismatch. You literally take it up, you throw it, and you say, we're not going to talk about that house again.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, no, and I think he even talks about that. That might have been in that section where he would say he'd pull comps and stuff, and then once, or I guess that's actually, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, narrowing the field of possible homes. So we'll get into that in a minute. And I think to circle back on what you hit on, and I think it's important to and what we've been talking about is understanding what's priced right and what's priced in the market versus out of the market. So it's going back to that tale of the 2 markets we talked about in tactic number 7. Homes that are priced well and in good conditions are always going to be the ones that are going to be first to sell. So
absolutely,
if you're a buyer and you walk into one of those homes and it meets your wants and your needs, then if it's in the market, then you gotta move forward, and you've got to be that agent to educate them on that.
So we've also talked through the Shift series about telling stories and leaning on stories of other agents' experiences. And, I remember one of my agents from, I think it was my Monmouth office, one of my Monmouth offices, had a client, buyer, a couple, and every house they went to, she could never find the perfect match. Yeah. Well, what do you know? They chose not to stay together. And so the problem was not the house. The house was going to fix the relationship. And if those are kind of things that we're not going to know until we see the signs, has nothing to do with real estate, has everything to do with relationship. And so there are going to be sometimes things that you cannot control. But if the motivation is not there to buy the house and you haven't isolated the objection, let's isolate the objection, guys. So what I'm hearing, Mr. Buyer, is this house doesn't fit your needs because it's not offering a 5th bedroom. So a 5th bedroom now needs to replace a 4th bedroom. Okay, no problem. Let's just be clear on expectations. And so if you've had that and you're not finding, you've isolated the objection and the objection keeps moving, you clearly have not isolated the true objection. You've got the surface objection.
Absolutely.
It's like psychology 101, Matt.
It is. No, and I think that's a great point. And I think, as you're isolating the objection, you start to walk through things. You're also going to, now we're going to shift, again, use the word shift, to pages 188 through really the end of this chapter, which is 4 strategies to overcome buyer reluctance. So once you isolate the objection, you get through that part, then you might be dealing with the second issue, which could just be buyer reluctance to submit an offer in this market. So the 4 strategies to overcome buyer reluctance, as written on page 188, I'll read them out. I'll read out all 4, and then we'll tackle them one at a time. Number 1 is why wait? The hazards of timing the market. Number 2, which is trade up, the opportunity of a down market. Number 3, less is more, narrowing the field, which I kind of alluded to, and we'll get into that. Number 4, find a best buy. Get while the getting's good. I like saying that. So I guess let's start with the first one, which is the hazards of timing the market. And I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit, and I'd love for you to talk about kind of those on page 189, the different scenarios, buy now or wait, scenario 1 versus scenario 2. But I think this ties into the hazards of timing the market. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, which is just that it's very difficult to consistently time the market. You might get lucky here or there. Yet when we were doing those exercises yesterday about the downward, the upward, timing the market is very difficult. You have to be in that safe zone. But I'd love for you to talk about kind of what they're discussing on the graphs on page 189 here.
So on page 189, it says it opens up with buyers who choose to wait until prices come down more, are also gambling the interest rates will hold steady. So I'm sure you've heard a buyer say, well, I just want to wait for it to come down a little more. Yep. Or in other markets, or even recently, I want to put an offer 20 or 30% off of market value, because that's where I know the market's going to go to. Now, those buyers, I would say, go ahead and write those offers, and then you're playing a tennis match.
Mm-hmm.
I put out an offer, and we'll get into different scripts with that, actually, because with that is when you put an offer, and I want you to understand that now is going to be a very important time for you to sharpen your negotiation skills, your tonality, your presentation of offers to other agents. It is your time to sharpen that leadership axe. And my point with this is that if you were to put an offer out there, if a buyer wants to put an offer 20 or 30% off market price, go ahead and write that offer, because when we're talking about 20% off of 500,000, it's a $400,000 offer. All right, it don't get offended by the people that are writing that offer. Get offended by the people that haven't come to see the house or have walked through the house and haven't thought to even put an offer out on your property. So when we are in a market like this and we're negotiating, we're looking to just squeeze that spread. If the offer comes in 20% off of the value or off of the price tag in order to get to the market value, you may look at the seller and say, hey, if we took 5% off of the price, would that be an acceptable offer? And just try to squeeze them that way. So back to your initial question about the diagram on page 189, it talks about 3 different scenarios, okay?
Yep.
When you're working with a buyer, unless they're paying all cash, which is not the case, we have a large brokerage. We see anywhere from 70 to 100 units close a month, and I can tell you that we are not dealing with a lot of cash purchases. Cash is king right now, so we're going to hold on to the cash, and we're going to leverage ourselves, and we're going to get mortgages, and we're going to leverage our assets to get more mortgages so we can acquire more assets. That's the temperature that we're in right now, guys. So when we're dealing with mortgages, a buyer is only going to be concerned, or only should be concerned, with what their monthly payment is going to be, okay? And so while we look at the monthly payment as a math problem, we look at 2 different factors. We look at the sales price and we look at the interest rate. And if you mix those up, and I advise you to talk to one of your favorite mortgage lenders to give you the real deal on this, and to actually have your client truly pre-approved so they can see what the options are, because credit will absolutely factor into this, and the amount of down payment and the type of loan will absolutely factor into this. However, let's just assume those 3 are the same for the 2 different scenarios. We are only looking at purchase price and interest rate to give us what is going to be the unique monthly payment. So in the example on page 189, it takes a home price of $200,000. You have the buyer who will pay $190,000, which is 5% off of the asking price, and they will have an interest rate of 6.5%. Now, we are not seeing those rates anymore, and that will just show you how 10 years ago, when this book was written, where the mortgage rates were at. And so we should really honestly feel blessed that we are talking about 4 and 3.5, and in some cases under 3 for a 30-year fix. And so when we take a look at that purchaser who buys at 190 with a 6.5% mortgage rate, they're paying $1,201 a month. Now, the guy who wants to get it at 180, and then the interest rate goes up by 0.5%, so he gets it for an extra 5% off the price. He pays 180, which is less.
Yep.
And guess what? His interest rate went up to 7%, which is 0.5% more, because he was trying to time the market. And his monthly payment is $1,198, just a $3 difference from the guy who bought it at 190 with the better interest rate. Okay, now I know that was a lot of numbers for everybody, but take a look at page 189, wrap your head around it. This is what happens. This is what you need to talk to a buyer about. As interest rates go up, their monthly payment, even on a lower purchase, will increase tremendously. So buy now, because we know what our interest rates are today.
Yep. Exactly. And I think, so then the other part that I think no one can sum that up better than you just did. I think that
Wait,
was, yeah.
but it's better. Hold on. Back to the original asking price. Now, here's to the sellers out there that say, well, we're not even at 6%. I'm asking 200,000. I want 200,000. So the guy who pays 200,000 right now in the current interest rate in the industry, which is less than, but at 6%, his mortgage payment's $11.99, which is still within the $2 to $3 range of all these scenarios. So we have a guy who bought at 200, which was asking price.
Yep.
We got a guy who bought at 190 and a guy who bought at 180, and their monthly payment was all still the same. So why wait?
Well, exactly. And I think, again, you summed that up excellently. And I think when we're talking about some of these 4 strategies, they're also really looking at like myths that people create and narratives that people tell in their heads, kind of like you were saying, the hazards of time in the market, why wait? Whereas the second one on page 189, which is the opportunity of a down market trading up, I think this one is very relevant too. And we touched on it a little bit yesterday in the sense that most buyers are also selling, or not most, but a lot of buyers are also selling a property as well. And they're concerned that if they're losing money on the sale of their house, that they're not going to make it back up on the purchase side. And ultimately, page 189 and 190 is ultimately saying that there's a graph, figure 48, it says falling home prices are a great opportunity for a savvy homeowner looking to move up. Even though your home sale price may be lower, the smaller loss at sale can be compensated by greater savings at purchase. So the example that they have is that if on the selling side, you have a home listed at 200,000, but it sells at 190, so you are losing 10,000 there. But if you're buying a bigger house, let's say home price is 400,000 and you buy it at 380, you're actually saving $20,000. So you're actually then saving more money that way, and the house is better positioned for appreciation when the market rebounds. So the bigger house that you're buying a year, 2 years later, when appreciation factors in, it's actually going to be better positioned for that. So that's, again, just another myth that people have.
Absolutely. And these conversations may be a little advanced for some people. And I would say just keep watching this over and over again. If you want to have a coaching consultation with either one of us to understand how to, you have to internalize this concept in order to truly convince a buyer or seller of what is happening here. It is a math problem, and yet there's a belief that, well, if the market is bad, it's bad. If the market is good, it's good. But to your point is, if you're buying, it's all going to be relevant to what your situation is. Correct. So now I want you to understand that the guy who needs to downsize in that same situation, who now he sells his house at 380, right? Which was it was it was a 5% off of the asking price. Okay. Yep. So the guy who is at 400,000 and he sells his house at 380 because he has to take 95% of what he's asking. That's what the market is yielding. That guy is now losing $20,000, and he's going to downsize, and he's going to buy something that he only gets a $10,000 discount on. Yep. And so in his mind, he lost $10,000, right?
Yep.
So, that was my father always. He would say, oh, I lost all this money in this house. And I would say, Dad, you never made the money in the house. You never tried to sell it. We enjoyed it as we raised the family here. We bought in 89 in Monmouth County. And my mother actually just recently sold the house in 2019. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so my father made this comment in 2005, 2006. We were talking about what the value of the house was. And then after we had the last shift, it was, oh, I lost all this money. And I said, Dad, you never lost the money. You didn't do anything when the market was there and then it came back down. But you bought over here. So if we look at what they bought for 209 or 219, and my mother wound up selling the house for 420, 30 years later. So when we're looking at somebody who's going to stay in your home for a while, let's not worry about what we would have made or what we would have paid last week, last month. You know, when we're looking at making a decision for our family and grabbing onto an asset, understand, buyer, that you are going to pay down that mortgage while you live there. And then at the end of it, especially if you're going to keep the house for 7 years or 10 years, 12 years, 30 years, like my mom, you're going to create some equity in there. And while you're enjoying that, I would advise you to talk to your local real estate agent and make sure you are potentially buying investment properties with that equity as that increases.
Absolutely.
So I also want to make one other comment is it's really easy for a seller who has to sell the house and think that they have to get every penny out of it to stick on that price. You know, in this case, the $200,000 condo, that they need every penny in order to buy the $400,000 single family house.
Yeah.
You really need to put things in perspective with them, because if they have the down payment money, there's no problem. If we're cutting into down payment money, then we might have to be the creative, or we may have to go a different route or wait, right? But if you have the money to put down in this market, there's no risk.
Well, and that's also a teaser for tomorrow's call or a session, which is on creative financing options. So,
Awesome.
nice job plugging a little teaser for that. So the first two strategies of overcoming buyer reluctance has more to do with like the financial aspect and the financial impact, whereas the next two are a little bit more just, I guess, mental or more emotionally driven options, which is number.
One more thing though, because there's one other seller. The seller who has another house already. The seller who's going to go and move into their beach house, or they're gonna pick up and go down to Florida, that they were renting that house out. So there's that seller, and that seller does feel like in a market where they're going to lose on their value, they absolutely feel like they're losing. And so with that seller, I want us to be clear that we have to think about what could they do with the equity that they are taking from the property that they're selling. Could they turn that into multiple properties, multiple streams of income? Will they be paying down debt? Will they be affording a grandchild to go to the college of their choice? You need to understand, when we sell this house, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what's your goal with the equity? Could I help advise you where you could spend it? And so if you could get them to see the positive, because everybody's in the what's in it for me. Well, of course you want to sell this because you want the commission. Of course you want your buyer to get what's in it for me. So just absolutely look for the benefit in every customer service act we do. Look for the benefit and sell the benefit, not the feature.
Absolutely. So as we move forward to page 191, which is less is more, narrowing the field, we kind of touched on this a little bit, and I don't think we need to take too much time on this, but ultimately what it's saying is that one of the challenges for buyers in a shift is simply that there are too many choices. So, there's too many homes that meet their criteria. So as this is saying, too much of a good thing can sometimes be mentally exhausting or ultimately unproductive. And they use an example. It was a study by Columbia University where they empirically proved the downside of excessive choice. They used like a grocery store where you have jams and jellies. And ultimately, when there were too many flavors, like if there were like 50 flavors to choose from, people actually ended up not buying something. But when it was narrowed down to just like 5 or 6 choices, somebody was more likely to pick one of those 5 choices. So to what you were saying earlier, if something only checks off 2 out of 5 boxes, so like if there's 5 things that they need and only 2 out of 5 fit, and you have out of 10 options, maybe 4 that actually are like 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, don't waste your time on the 2 out of 5 ones, because then they get inundated with too many options. So really 191 and 192 is really just saying, make sure that you're really just narrowing the field, and when there's one that doesn't fit, throw it away. To your point before, just crumple up the sheet of paper and really just throw it in the trash, because there's no reason to go look at it.
That's right. And another, just a very simple script. You're
Mhm.
walking away from that house or you're getting off that virtual tour and you're saying, do you want to buy this?
Yep.
That's it. That's the
Yeah.
script. You have to ASK to GET.
Yep.
So says my coach. So to that point is moving into the last one, which is the best buy,
The best
and
part.
getting while the going's good. Is that that what it's
Yeah.
called?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and this is the best one, I think, or most
get while
best
the
one, I think.
getting's good.
Do you want to talk about it?
Just a little bit. I mean, I remember when we had the shift tour and we had mega camp around shift time, and I remember it being, if you're an agent, you need to be doing that research to find the best of the market. I've shared this with some of our agents in some of the classes that we teach at KW Prosperity, and it's weekly. If you were to send out a best buy list in Wayne, New Jersey, a best buy list in Passaic County, a best buy list in Randolph, New Jersey,
Yeah.
a best buy list, a best buy for the value, a best buy for the kitchen, the best backyard that's on the market for the price, the best location that's on the market. If you really truly showed your buyers and sellers the best ofs,
Mm-hmm.
you they look at you as a market specialist for sure.
And it also creates urgency because if you're saying these
The
are the best
best is
buys right
going.
now, you got to submit this offer now and not later.
Absolutely. Everybody wants the best. So if I am specifically looking for that kitchen, that yard, and I'm on that best buy list, this house on the best buy list, it creates an urgency. It puts them in a spotlight, and it makes it where somebody's going to get it. It creates like an auction feel for the buyer, like the fear of missing out, the fear of loss.
Well, and it's also a great thing. It's also a call to action if you were to reach out to your sphere or anyone and say, for access to my best buy list, which is updated daily, register now or call me now. That's something that it creates that urgency. Like, okay, well, I need to call this. I need to find out what this best buy list is to create that urgency that isn't necessarily existing in that type of market.
Sure. Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, so do you have any, I mean, we're at the end of the chapter. Really the last section, or the last sentence in this chapter, which I think I just wanted to read, it says, creating urgency is a learned skill. And once learned, it will create new opportunities for you and for your buyers. Just remember, the first urgency must be yours. And I like that line because creating urgency is a learned skill. So, this whole chapter, these aren't things that you're born with. They're things that you're learning and that you're adapting to and that you're learning how to communicate with your buyers.
Yeah, I mean, Gary also says here, Gary or Jay says that urgency, you can't fake it. It has to be an authentic, and that's why I say you need to understand these concepts, internalize them, understand the market, understand your client, truly be almost, a true consultant, and then when you're compelling is because you believe it's the right thing for them to do.
Yeah.
Do not try to go into this and just kind of fake it because that's what the book tells you and that's what scripts you should be using. You truly need to embrace it. And as Matt, as you just said, it's a learned skill. So continue to sharpen that axe and master that. So
Absolutely. So
I think it's a great session, and I hope everybody takes away a little bit from this, that there needs to be some practice
yep.
and some more learning on how to utilize the strategy of creating urgency.
Absolutely. So, really yesterday and today we talked all about buyer urgency and how to overcome buyer reluctance.
Yep.
Tomorrow, tactic number 10, we're going to be talking about creative financing, as I mentioned. Are we going to have a guest on our call tomorrow, one of our mortgage? Were you able to confirm if you can be on, or?
I'm not positive, not yet.
We'll see. So just so you guys know, tomorrow's call is going to be at a different time because we have an obligation before this. So we're going to be on around 11:15-ish. So come on at 11:15 and we'll move forward because then we have another call right after at 12. So we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.
Awesome. Have a great day.